Do you know someone in foster care? Have you been in foster care? Do you have a child in foster care? Are you a grandparent or relative caring for a family member? Are you considering becoming a foster parent? Then tune in every Wednesday at 3 p.m. to Fresh Start Today on WNOV 860 AM to engage in thought-provoking conversations with families and providers about child welfare services, both locally and nationally. Together, we can save our children.
Good afternoon. You're listening to Fresh Start Today, and I'm your host, Jermaine Reed, and co-host is Mr. Sean Roby, and we have some phenomenal guests who are in the studio today. We have Kathy Arney, who is the Vice President of Community Services at Pathfinders, and we also have James, our special guest today. Welcome, everybody.
Hey.
Welcome.
Hello.
Thanks for being.
Now, what we want to do is make sure that we're speaking into the microphone because there's a lot that we have to say, and we want to make sure that the folks in the listening audience can capture all of it. Also want to give a shout-out to our engineer, Mr. Keon. Keon, how you doing? All right, and we have the videographer himself, Mr. Tony Cash. Good afternoon. So we're going to be talking about a very, very important topic today, which is silent victims of sexual abuse, boys. And not just boys who are sexually abused, because normally when you talk about sexual abuse, we automatically think about females. And in society, we're very sympathetic to the abuse that young women, young girls, and women in general suffer. And we automatically assume that the male is the perpetrator.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Correct. Am I the only one? Have we?
I agree.
Yeah,
all right.
it's real.
And I told everybody to turn their phone off, and now my phone is on. But there are some silent victims, and those are boys. And boys are I think it's 1 out of 6 every boy, according to the Center for Disease Control and the American Journal of Preventive Medicine, indicate that 1 out of 6 boys are sexually abused in their lifetime or before they're 18, which means that on average, there's about 42 million adult survivors of child sexual abuse in America. That's a huge number, that's a nation. 42 million survivors.
Literally. I had no idea.
And we know that sexual abuse and child sexual abuse happens in every community.
Indeed.
African American, Caucasian, Asian, can't forget Hispanics.
Mm-hmm.
Every community.
You know, and
That's
I think what's vital to that is that child sexual abuse does not specify one particular socioeconomic status.
No, it doesn't
Rich,
discriminate.
poor, middle class, every class. So that's very, very important for everybody to keep in mind.
And we also need to understand, as it relates to boys and sexual abuse, and I'm sure that Kathy Arney can chime in here, is that the average age, anybody know the average age for, don't say anything, Kathy, the average age for a boy to be sexually abused? Anybody? Now, we have 3 over here.
I gotta say, 5.
Okay, you say 5. Now, this is what I'm going to do for those who are listening in the audience today. Mr. Reed and Sean Rowe, we're going to do something. If you can call in and give us the correct answer to the average age of a boy being sexually abused, you can win 2 tickets to the Patti LaBelle concert on January 6th.
Hold on.
No, you don't got you hear it. They got to call 414-444-5250, 414-444-5250. Now, this is coming out of our pocket. Is not going to be on our cost report. Just want to say that. All right. So I want you to community call in 414-444-5250, and the first person to give us the answer to that question: what is the average age that a boy is sexually abused in America? You can win 2 tickets to the Patti LaBelle concert. Now, we also know that boys are most commonly abused by males, between 50 to 75%. However, there are boys who are victimized by women.
Indeed.
Correct.
And there's another population we'll get into talking about today, and that's mothers. Mother to son sexual abuse. So, yeah, we'll get it. So, let's figure out what we're going to discuss and what points we want to make sure that folks have. Caller, do you have an answer?
Is it 7?
No. Thank you for calling. So, what we understand is that first, we want to look at the extent of child sexual abuse in America. 2, we want to identify who are the sex offenders of boys. Then we also want to touch on the common myths associated with boys being sexually abused by women. Next, we want to look at how sexual abuse of women and mothers particularly affect boys. We also want to learn some of the signs of sexual abuse, and hopefully we can identify community resources to give to everybody. So the first thing I want to do is have Kathy introduce herself. Kathy, what do you do? Where do you work? And
I am Kathy Arney, and I'm the Vice President of Community Services at Pathfinders. Pathfinders is a youth-serving organization that specializes in runaway and homeless youth as well as traumatized youth. We've been around for over 45 years. I've worked there about 18 years. I've done other things, but my specialty has always been working with those who have trauma in their lives.
okay, great. Now, where's your program located?
We're at 4200 North Holton.
4200 North Holton. Okay, well, we're glad to have you on the show. This is
Thank
your
you.
first time, Kathy. I know you're going to be coming back because we're going to be talking about in the future males who are sex trafficked, which is another hot topic right now. But how pervasive is the sexual abuse of boys in America? We talked about 1 in 6, but what about in Wisconsin? Do we know what that looks like?
You know, I have been in this field for over 30 years, and the statistics have not changed in 30 years.
In 30 years? That's almost all my life. That's James, you was 1 or 2 when those statistics came out.
That's my whole life.
Your whole life. So
Your whole life.
what are the statistics?
It is 1 in 6.
1 in 6 still.
boys, 1 in 4 girls. But my experience
That's
tells
consistent
me
with the national data.
it is. It
Oh.
is.
Wow.
And but my experience,
Okay, your
in the
experience.
30 years, and it's not just the clients I've seen, the stories I've heard other therapists talk about, the youth that I run into that come to our agency.
Yeah.
But it's also the men that in my life who I love, who have been sexually abused as well, that I really do think that it's probably more even with the statistics of how often girls are sexually abused.
So you're thinking 1 in 4.
I'm thinking 1 in 4,
you know,
and I think that because, there was a time where we just have such a narrow idea
Yes.
of who is a victim and who isn't a victim, and so we just assumed way back when Child Protective Services would come into a home and maybe investigate abuse, they wouldn't even interview the boys.
Oh, wow.
'Cause-
So how social serving agencies and law enforcement, all of their attitudes toward male victims of sexual abuse determines how they respond.
Well, it wasn't just those agencies.
Well,
It
yeah, in
was-
just- I'm just-
it,
in
it
just-
was our cultural in general.
Our culture in general.
So we have we have a difficult time thinking about men as victims, and we just accept that women are victims, but we have a difficult time accepting that men can be victims.
And to add to that, when you talk about that societal factor and that cultural aspect, men and boys are genderized early on to be a certain way.
That's
So that
right.
socialization process is
Absolutely.
really that
That's
gender
right.
bias.
Yep.
And, yeah. And so what is that attitude? How do we socialize boys around their manhood, their sexuality? What is the message there?
The message is that men, to be a man means you protect yourself, you're strong,
That's right.
you're never vulnerable, and you may be the aggressor, but you are not the victim.
And no crying. Because
That-
boys and
that's
men
part of
don't
it.
cry.
Okay,
That's
so
part
in
the
terms of
message.
substance,
Absolutely.
facts and details. So we have this attitude that boys are tough, macho manhood, that you can't be the victim, you're the perpetrator. But are there any other myths that's out there? What are some common myths associated with, boys being sexually abused?
There's a myth that says that men always want sex, so therefore they can't be raped.
Okay.
That's
okay.
not correct.
Okay.
There's
How physically can a woman rape or molest a man?
Because physically,
physically
she's
a
more
man
delicate.
is stronger,
A man is
and
stronger.
a woman is more delicate. So people, that's
That's impossible.
unbelievable.
It's
Yeah.
unbelievable. Okay.
that's really well put.
You have another myth that sexual abuse is less harmful to boys than girls.
That's another one. That's a really good one.
And that's absolutely not the case at all. It may
Yeah.
show differently or impact them differently, but it's still extremely harmful to boys as well.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah,
So we
absolutely.
No idea.
okay. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to break because we're gonna talk with James, and just want to announce that James John Hogan is our winner for the Paddle Bell tickets. The average age for a boy to be sexually abused is 10 years of age. The age
10
range
years
at
old.
which, yeah. However, boys can be victimized from infancy all the way through late adolescence, but the average age is 10, and that's even younger than females.
Yep.
So that's
Wow.
interesting. Yeah, that's really deep. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk to James, and I'm going to play this clip from you from a famous entertainer who experienced some sexual abuse as a child. We'll be right back.
Do you know what Nelson Mandela, Andrew Jackson, Malcolm X, and Steve Jobs have in common? Each of these individuals were world leaders who were once in foster care. We often hear about the road from foster care to prison, but did you know there's another road from foster care to a world stage? Fresh Start Family Services is looking for adults to become licensed foster parents. Every child needs a caring adult in their lives. Wouldn't it be great if you could foster or adopt the next world leader? For more information on how you can become licensed with Fresh Start, please call 414-351-1100. That is 351-1100.
Good afternoon. You're listening to Fresh Start today on WNOV 860 AM The Voice. I'm your host, Jermaine Reed, with Sean Roby, and we have two in-studio guests, James and Kathy Arney from Pathfinders. And we're talking about boys who have been sexually abused as a child and how prevalent that issue is in our community. The last segment, we were talking about some of the myths that exist out there regarding boys who are sexually abused or the sexual abuse of boys. And there's a couple other myths while we're getting this clip ready for you all to listen to. But we also know that just because boys have been sexually abused does not mean that they will grow up and abuse or perpetrate others. But there's a number of other myths. And
Well, I think there's another large myth is that if a female used or abused a boy, he was quote unquote lucky. And if he doesn't feel that way, there's something wrong.
And that's what we were
him.
going to talk about into this whole thing about society's attitude, how we socialize males that, you know, because I don't know if we'll take the same attitude, Kathy, if a girl is sexually abused by a man, that we will say that she's lucky.
Right.
That's right.
So why do we do that when it's with boys? I don't understand that.
Well, there is an attitude towards men in our society that shows that says that they're in a man box.
Okay.
And so they can be strong, they can be protective of themselves, they can be self-sufficient, they can be all those strong things, but they cannot be a victim.
Because victim means you're weak.
Means
And
you're
that
weak.
doesn't align with our image of men. Okay.
That's right.
Okay.
It doesn't align with
And it's going against the supposedly code that men supposed
There's a
to
man
have.
code.
Man
yeah,
code.
You know what I mean?
Wow,
Hey, we got this
powerful.
man code here, and I got some from an older chick or something, so now I'm cool. And not knowing the whole time it's you, the one that just got played, you know.
So James, while
Right.
we're getting that ready, I'm waiting. We're going to play this clip.
Unsung, the story of Ike Turner. Born in 1931, Ike Turner was never a stranger to trouble or hard times. His mother was a seamstress, his father a Baptist minister. He grew up on the outskirts of Clarksdale, Mississippi, where poverty and segregation came with the territory.
That was quite a bit a divide at that time. Was a little tough. There was a lot of, prejudice.
The protection, that law is supposed to give to people, that was non-existent in those days.
When Ike was 5 years old, he watched as his father was savagely beaten by a local posse for having an affair with a white woman.
He was actually in the front window watching these men do this to his father. You know what I'm saying? That is traumatic enough. And then seeing that and not being able to do anything about it.
The hospitals during the time wouldn't even allow him to go to be treated.
They had to prepare a tent in the backyard. And him and my mom would have to go out and take things to his dad, and they say you could smell it from miles around because his intestines was completely beaten out.
His father ultimately died from his injuries.
You know, something like that at a young age, you know, you don't ever erase.
With his father gone, Ike was frequently abused sexually by older women, beginning at the age of 6.
By the time he was 12 years old, he had been molested by 3 older women. Yes. And, you know, it was rape. These women forced themselves upon him as a kid.
No one looked at it in that terms of degree, but it probably gave him a lower esteem as far as dealing with women.
So, the great Ike Turner. Great Ike Turner. There's others. I mean, you had mentioned
Tyler Perry.
Tyler Perry. I'm sure there's others, but Ike Turner, because all we hear about is Ike Turner and him
In a negative way.
and they were fighting and abusing, you know.
Yes.
So and they were able to make possibly the association that what he had experienced as a child impacted his relationship with women as an adult.
Exactly.
But let's talk about it, James. Let's talk about your story, because there are boys in our community right here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin,
Right.
who are being raped by women. Talk a little bit about your story.
Well, I'm gonna tell the truth. You know, at the time, I wasn't looking at it as being taken advantage of or I was being raped. I looked at it as if they looked at me as, look at this young man. He's on the level enough for me to sleep with. Or
How old were you?
Well, it first started at a young age, young, like I say the first time was about fourth grade. And this bus driver we had, my stop was the last stop.
Your stop was the last stop.
Yeah. And when she used to drop the rest of the kids off, before she took me to the stop, she'd park the bus and we'll start, quote unquote, wrestling. That's what she called it, you know what I mean? But, you know, I'm filling her up and, you know what I'm saying, you know, experiencing things. And after a while, she started telling me how she was a lingerie model for Sears. And, you know, which was, to this day, baffles me. I didn't care. Like, what was the point of telling me that, you know?
So you're around 9 years old?
Yeah.
Somewhere
you know,
in that area.
somewhere
Okay.
around that age. You know, around fourth grade, yeah. So, you know, it went from her to one of my babysitters, you know. Moms was working hard, and when I got dropped, I mean, this lady, my mom's trust, and she used to smile in my mom's face like she was her best friend in the world, you know.
How old was she about?
She was around 28.
And you were about?
No, she was like 18, 19.
Okay.
And I was around 12, 13 at the time.
Okay.
And she would smile in my mom's face, and while she's sitting there agreeing and having conversations with moms, I'd be sitting there wondering, do my mom have a clue what this lady what me and her finna do?
Okay.
You know, and the whole time I'm thinking it's me, you know. I'm the one who persuading them to do it, or it's me that's getting what I want from it.
Well, let me ask Kathy right there. We're going to go back to your story. So, Kathy, do you think that victims of sexual abuse often feel like I'm causing this, or I'm responsible, if there's something? What is your experience?
Absolutely. I don't know that I've ever had witnessed someone telling me their story that doesn't at some point say that they were responsible for what happened to them. Even when you can say, but you know, you were in fourth grade, you were a little kid, and the abuser was an adult. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not a logical thought process. It's a distortion. And lots of times kids, when they don't know how else to make sense of something, they just blame themselves.
Gotcha. So that's self-blame. So that's where you're from. Now, how old were you? You said about, was this the neighbor?
No, this right here, that lady that I just got through talking about
Was
was
a
the
friend.
babysitter.
Okay,
Yeah.
but there was someone.
But there was a neighbor, yes. Around this time, I was about 13, 12, around the same age. She lived right across the street from our apartment building.
Where you live, yeah.
It was some grass, and then it was her door. And she called me one time. Her and her friends was outside drinking for a birthday party, and she called me over to her house, and she asked me, "You want to kick it over here? You know what I'm saying? You want to kick it with me?" And of course, I'm like, "Sure, it's a new adventure for me. I love to." And she asked me, "You ain't one of them types to go run back to your mom's, is you?" And, me being young, I'm like, "No, I'm going to my mom's, No, I ain't finna go tell, because I want to be a man, and I'm thinking this is what men do, she chose me or something." So it was cool for a while until she put some hickeys on my neck, and moms found out, not after long, that it was her who did it. So, moms went kind of crazy, kicked down the door. But,
Okay.
After her, it
There
went
were
from
multiple-
lawyers.
Right, because there was a prosecuting attorney that
Yeah, this
who
one-
was connected, was not your attorney, but that was
Yeah,
person by profession.
she was a friend. She was a friend of mine's girlfriend's mom, and my friend girlfriend was having a quinceañera, and it was her mother, and we was driving to go pick up some materials for the quinceañera, and at a red light, her mom's was like, "Hey, look at me," and I looked at her, and she kissed me full mouth, tongue, right there. And around this time, I'm like 15, 16, and I'm thinking sweet, but this done happened so many times, and I thought that this is the way it's supposed to be. I wasn't interested in girls my age anymore, because after I'm been with an older lady, what would they have to offer me? What would we talk about? You know what I mean? So I'm thinking I'm doing a good thing, and I'm looking at everybody else my age with girls their age, like, y'all kids, man,
Okay, so it's happening, and it's happening because your experience fits really well with the national statistic or data that says that boys at the average age is around 10 that they're sexually abused. Now, in your past, even before that incident at 9 or 10, there was the 5-year-old when you were 5 years old.
Yeah.
And so sex abuse of boys can happen at any point from infancy all the way through late adolescence.
Yeah.
And again, these are folks who are trusted individuals, bus drivers, friends, parents, neighbors, folks who live across the street.
Even family friends. This time, it was a guy we call Uncle in the family. He wasn't related to us, but he was considered
like
our uncle. Yeah, he was something like kin. And he was supposed to babysit us, But when moms would leave, he'd try to touch me and my little brother, and I'll fight back,
So before we go into Kathy, how many sexual encounters did you have with women? The number of women that you had sexual encounters with before your 18th birthday?
Before my 18th birthday?
18, yeah.
I promise, as God is my witness, I honestly couldn't count.
It's that prevalent? Was that?
Yeah, one time I was real down on my luck. I moved in with this family, and the mom said, "You can live here with us," and I'm like, "Cool." And her daughter was like 28. I was 16, and she like, I don't care what my mom said, you gotta have sex with me to live here,
Okay, gotcha.
And that was I hated that.
All right. And if folks want to join this conversation, they can call 414-444-5250, 414-444-5250. So Kathy, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, James is really speaking clearly about the ability of an adult to coerce and to groom children into doing what they want them to do.
Right.
So, first of all, it's usually someone they know.
Okay.
In the majority of cases of sexual abuse, whether it's by a male perpetrator or a female perpetrator, they usually know the perpetrator. Also, they are able to talk youth into doing, and young children into doing things by either threatening their younger sibling, by threatening that they're going to hurt the dog.
Well, women do this too, though? I mean, are the tactics of men and women the same, though?
No, they're not. It's
okay.
very different with women.
Okay.
And there's very little known about female perpetrators of sexual abuse.
Okay.
There's a difficult time collecting data about it, and there's not a whole lot of research out there.
But from what we know,
And I think when you talk about men abusers versus female abusers, most of the research in terms of women is just really getting started. So that's why everything is gravitated towards men. So that's why we can identify a male abuser that does A, B, C, D.
That's absolutely correct.
And funding, statistics drive funding.
That's right. And the real negative outcome of that is there aren't enough services for men.
Exactly. For boys and men, really. You
right.
know,
for boys and men.
Because boys, when they act out, if it's as a result of sexual abuse or trauma, they're typically, passed along to law enforcement, detention centers, juvie hall, or whatever.
Yes.
Where girls, there's a plethora of programs that's out here to really service their needs.
That's
so
right.
we do a disservice to the male population. But
That's right.
but from what we know, why do women molest or sexually abuse boys?
Well, we know for sure that women who sexually abuse children have a really extensive abuse history of their own.
Okay.
And that comes from research done in corrections. So these are women who have been prosecuted for their crimes. And those crimes are known to somebody. There are a lot of women who abuse where the crime never comes to light, that the child never tells.
I also believe
From the women that you dealt with.
Yeah, from
the women
experience
that you were raped by.
Right. Basically, I was, looking back at it, that's exactly how I looked at it. I was took advantage and raped by a lot of these women.
What kind of women were these women, though?
Man, these women stem from single mothers to lawyers to doctors to your regular.
Was it about power and control? What was it about in that interaction for you?
The two major things that I saw was they felt young again, or it made them feel like they had something they lost. I was filling in a void that they lost or something. Maybe the Stellar got a groove back theory or something like that, But the second thing is that they know a young man, 9 times out of 10, not going to tell. Because young man will want to come back to it and try to do it as much as he can, you know what I mean?
So at any point, and not minimizing the damage or the impact of your experience and the abuse and the rape that you suffered, because let's call it what it is.
Yeah.
But was there any point that during that journey that you shared with somebody else, maybe your friends or your boys or your cousins, about what was going on, who you were dealing with, or, did at any point you feel or your boys feel or, that, wow, man, you got it going on. That's cool.
Oh, yes. There's been times when actually I'll call my guy and be like, hey, this woman is meeting me
Got you.
at this destination at a certain time.
Yeah.
And if you don't believe me, drive past at that certain time and you will see both of our cars.
And that goes back to that socialization aspect where males are supposed to be a certain way.
Exactly. It's supposed to be cool.
It's absolutely.
But at the same time, this is a 38-year-old woman, and I'm a 17-year-old child, or 16-year-old child.
Absolutely.
However, it stemmed from a long time, from 5 until I got married, and I got.
That's a long time. That's a long time.
And so that really made James vulnerable then, because his perpetrators could see, and it's more of a sense, not that he did anything to demonstrate this, but they could see that he was vulnerable and that he would be an easy mark. And those are the youth that you see abused over and over again. Those are also the youth that you see that end up in human trafficking.
Okay. And so that becomes a segue.
And I think before you go on to that, some of the things when we talk about the differences between female and male perpetrators, you have to also think some of the similarities, because you have that power and control aspect. You have the
Indeed.
things where that whole manipulation, gifts, and
Grooming,
things like that.
the gifts,
and that
yes.
grooming.
That's all it is. I mean, they would literally sit back. I got you a gift, make you feel like a
That
king
entice
or
you.
Feel
something.
special.
Here, borrow my car or something. You young, you ain't got your own car yet. Here, drive around in it. When you come back, I
And
made
that's that
dinner for you,
universal
and it's making you
similarity.
feel like, hey, I'm a real man. She
Right.
cooking dinner. Like
Yeah.
I remember one lady, her kid was older than me, and I went to the house like, hey, what's going on, man? And he like, dog, mom, for real? And excuse me, partner, I'm finna go in here with your moms. Like it was weird, but it happened that way. Like
And how that impacted that young man.
yeah,
That's deep.
to this day, it was a couple friends' moms when I was coming up, I who happened to
That
rape
you were
me
involved
too.
with, who raped you.
basically,
Yeah.
who raped me too. And
So
some of the friendships we happen to mend back, but some, scarred forever.
So let's talk about Kathy and James. And if folks want to chime in, they can call 414-444-5250. So let's talk about the effects of sexual abuse on boys. I mean, does that looks differently than the effects of sexual abuse on girls?
Well, the only way that it's different is, again, the gender
The gender,
expectations.
that's it.
The expectations say that it is really okay for girls to be depressed. It's okay for them to be withdrawn. So girls act in. They might hurt themselves. They might start cutting on themselves. They might start having multiple high-risk sexual experiences.
Okay.
But boys are more explosive.
They act out.
They act out.
Yeah.
And
so girls act in, boys typically act out. Okay, go ahead.
And that is, so they probably have the exact same feelings going on inside of them, but they express them very differently.
So let me ask you this. If a man rapes a girl, do you think the girl walks away and questions her sexual orientation?
No.
Versus a boy who is raped by a woman, do you think that...
I'm not sure that a boy who's raped by a woman starts questioning their sexual orientation.
Okay.
I do think that a boy who is sexually abused by a man may question. They may think that they are gay. They might think that they caused it because they're gay. They might think they've been turned gay. They may
Right.
think that their perpetrator's gay.
And
that's a myth
I
in
didn't mean to
itself.
cut
And that's
you
a
off.
myth in itself, yes.
The guy that I was telling you about who tried to do stuff to me and my brother, and when I would fight him off, he would burn me and my brother with cigarettes, but he would burn my brother more to punish me for fighting him back.
Because you're the older.
Yeah.
Question for you, because I think this is important and one that needs to be asked. Where were your parents in all of this?
My mother was at the time working very hard, but she had a bad drug problem.
Got you.
And at the time, she was a teen herself.
Young mother herself.
Yeah, and no father around. So,
So children who are unsupervised for whatever reason
Yes.
are at greater risk
Are
of being
greater
sexually
risk.
abused.
and especially if the mother is rushing and trying to do certain things, because it's like she's more likely to say, hey, could you watch my
Anybody,
kid?
yeah. I gotta go
Because
to
she
work.
got to go to work. Because she got to
keep
go to
lights
work.
on and food on the table.
And so how do
That's
we
right.
deal with that right there?
Well, now that I thought about this over the years, because I now have a son. And,
Okay.
I'm so overprotective over my son.
I was going to ask you about that.
And if it's
Good reason.
two things that I could say is no, I mean, absolutely know the person you leaving your son with, you know, or your daughter with, and it's not bad to have a spy cam. It's not bad to have one of those, just in case.
Yeah.
You know, and the second thing is to, whenever that person pops up, whenever they leaving or coming to babysit, or whenever you mention their name, pay attention to your children's face. Pay attention to their actions, their body language, their movements. You know,
what are some of the other signs? Because he's talking about watching body language. What are some of the signs that maybe perhaps a child is being, and particularly boys, because if boys aren't talking, you know, how are they expressing?
I stared. I could tell you, I was a starer. Like,
blank stare.
Yeah, like if she, like the babysitter, for instance, or the lawyer. When I saw the lawyer talking to her husband, when I know we was doing what we was doing, I just stare at it. And I'm thinking 1,000 things. Like, I wonder, do he got a hint? I wonder, you know, man, this is great, woo, 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 but I'll be a starer. You know, everybody has their tale. Everybody got something, you know. And a kids, I grew to believe 85% communication nonverbal. And kids are the greatest at showing you how they feel, especially when they're in the essence of a person they don't like or don't trust.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They'll let you know.
Yeah, I think you have to be paying attention to your children. And I empathize with how difficult that might be sometimes, as we're talking about here, for somebody who's a single parent trying to keep food on the table, trying to keep the lights on.
Absolutely.
That's really difficult, but you have to pay attention to your children, and you will notice a change. There will be some kind of change, and it might be very subtle. But there will be a change, and parents are in the best position to know that. But also teachers will know that as well. Yeah. You might have a student who all of a sudden they just show disinterest in whatever it is you're teaching.
Something that they could have been really good at, but now all of a sudden it's that immediate withdrawal.
I was a straight A student in school, you know, and...
So, no, you're a straight A student, so you say your grades go back.
No, I mean, my grades stayed good, but my attitude just crashed and burned. It was like, if, you know, don't talk to me this way. The teachers don't talk to me this way. I got suspended regularly because
I got you.
I'm not getting
and
commands.
people, maybe folks are not even associating connecting that to sexual abuse. Now, according
I mean?
to Stop It Now, some of the warning signs of sexual abuse is nightmares or other sleep problems, deprivation. It could also be a distraction or distant at odd times, distancing themselves, disconnection, alienating themselves, sudden change in their eating habits, refuses to eat. There's a loss or decrease in their appetite, those things that parents can watch out for. Bathroom habits can be the clothes that you're washing, a number of those things you can look at. We have a caller on Fresh Start. Caller, you have a question or brief comment?
I just want to say I really thank the guy for coming in today and really expressing what he has been going through, because it's not easy for males to say, hey, I'm a product of sexual abuse by women and men. But I'm glad that he indicated that things did change, but no one noticed. And I think as a parent of two boys, we need to pay more attention, because there will be signs. Sometimes they don't say anything, but if we know our children, we know that something has happened. And we need to reassure them that, hey, I will take care of this.
Indeed.
So once the first situation happened, it meant that I need to be more vigilant of who is around my child, because obviously in these sick women's minds, there's something he has that they want.
Yes, indeed.
So, so if it means me changing my shift at work or whatever I have to do, I'm going to do it. Sometimes it's a sacrifice to work some odd job that you don't want to work.
Yeah.
But as a mother, as a parent, you do what you have to do to keep your kid safe.
Exactly, because your
and so I'm glad he's at a point in his life now that he's married and doing well for himself. But I, as a woman, want to apologize for those women who did what they did to you, because they were so out of line.
That's deep.
It's just uncalled for whatever reason. If they was trying to get their groove back or whatever the case might be, you were a child and they took your innocence, and it wasn't fair to you at all.
Thanks a lot, caller.
I really appreciate that. That was deep, and I'm very moved by that. I hope you have a great day, and thank you.
Another thing that parents can look out for is if your kids are coming home with gifts that you can't explain. They have some money that you know that they don't have a job, and you know, and
you didn't give it to them.
You didn't give it to them. You know, I mean, because in your situation, did your mother see any of the signs? I know there was the hickeys, but were there other signs and responses, even with her working and doing what she needed to do to hold it down? Were there signs that she saw that, or maybe in your conversations, you know, years later than talking with your mom, she said, you know what? Wow, I didn't realize that was a sign, but now looking back.
Oh, yeah. She would see a lot when I would just tell her I'm taking out the trash. And this is your 6th time taking out the trash today.
Where you going? Where you taking trash to?
What's going on? You know, when really I'm going to the lady house right across the way, you know what I mean? So I can do whatever.
Is it safe to say, Kathy, that we all know somebody who's been sexually assaulted or sexually abused? I mean, is it that prevalent, sexual abuse?
It is. It's 1 out of 4 girls, 1 out of 6 boys. So if I'm in a room, like say I'm in a crowd of 10, I look around and I wonder who in this room has been abused.
And then the other side to that, those numbers for boys are really underreported.
Yeah, those are. That's what I feel.
3 or 4,
it's like really underreported because a lot of people get away, and a lot of boys or young men don't realize that it's rape that's happening.
And
you know,
that's
right.
rape.
And
so, how do you help people who don't see themselves as victims, Kathy?
I'm sorry.
How do you help people who don't see themselves as victims?
Well, what we've done is try to give some education to those children who don't see themselves as victims. Usually that happens more in the teen years than it would a small child.
All right.
And so, you know, what we do is try to give them information, and we've had clients at our agency who don't feel as if they've been abused. And what are we going to do? Spend time going, yes, you are a victim. You are a victim. That doesn't seem like a very productive strategy.
Okay.
So, you know, we're more likely to say, here's some information for you. This is what a healthy relationship looks like.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think you could have a healthy relationship in your life? And we try to go from that perspective, and that we never shut the door. If somebody wants to come back later and they have figured out, you know, as our other guest here has talked about, they figure out later I was abused. There's help for that segment
real.
too.
Yeah,
And that's so
real.
important because everybody doesn't quote unquote heal
Right.
or understand at the same time,
That's
and that's
right.
so
That-
important.
That
Right.
is a really good point.
And
Thank
when
you
you-
for making it.
When you brought up people who've been into this situation, have nightmares or whatever, like I take a lot of sleeping drugs, Klonopin, PTSD, all type of stuff to this day now. You know,
As a result of that trauma.
I believe so. Yeah, like because I necessarily don't know what else it would be from.
Connected
you know,
from.
and you know, it's not a fun road. And looking back on it,
Is
not
it
a
also
fun-
safe to say that folks who have been exposed to these type of traumas in their early childhood, that somebody's going to pay for that later? I'm thinking about Ike Turner's story, you know, and Tina Turner, Anime Bellum. Anime, you go eat the cake? Anime?
Right.
Somebody is going to pay for that sooner or later for that trauma that we cause children in their early childhood. You know, but there's a population that we have to talk about before we close out this segment. And again, if you want to join this conversation, you can call 414-444-5250. And let's talk about, I mean, we know that boys who are sexually abused, those numbers are less than females, reported numbers.
Right.
We also know that they are silent victims and they really don't talk about it, and we don't talk about it.
Right.
But there is a even more silent population of sexually abused boys.
Right.
And those are those individuals who are sexually abused by their mothers or a female caregiver.
Yeah.
Yes.
How does sexual abuse of a boy by his mother different in terms of the impact effect on that child than the boy who is sexually abused by another woman or even a male?
Well,
Captain Demolition.
No doubt.
So I do think the prevalence is much less than a father-daughter
Okay.
Scenario or a father-son scenario. But I think we have to look at this as that there are some significant mental health issues going on.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the perpetrator definitely had the mother definitely had her own history of sexual abuse. She may be very needy and maybe not very mature, so she may see her child as her peer.
Yeah.
And cross the boundary that way, or she may
The emotional incest and the things that go on there.
That's right.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So now, men who go ahead, Mr. Rowe.
You wanted to respond.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, not knowing much about that study, I know the bottom line is a lot of these women. The bottom line is they want attention. They feel the need that I need love in my life, or I need this in my life for some reason. Whether it's for a short period of time or a long period of time, they feel like I can't get it with some of my own age or people my age done played me or whoever. Maybe it's like something's wrong psychologically and they need help. But
I really like that you made that point, because I do think it's attention. And if you're a person who was also sexually abused and you learned that the way that you get love and the way that you get attention is by being sexual, then you will carry on that that idea. That
Absolutely.
Yes, the cycle of abuse.
Point. Yep.
And so it's exactly what you're saying, James, that they need the attention for whatever reason, and they reach for it in very inappropriate ways.
Now, I was reading a study. I appreciate those contributions there, but I want to kind of go back to this piece about emotional incest and these boundaries and role reversals, putting your son in the capacity of the role of your husband or your boyfriend or your companion. I want to kind of look at how is that done, because in that type of situation, that context, the son is likely to feel aligned with his mother and protective of her at the same time, wanting to please her and to take care of her. I mean, how do we balance that? Males should take care of, boys should take care of their mom.
A lot of times these days, the mom is a baby herself, so she was used to chilling back, not doing much from jump in the first place. And let's just say in a scenario, her son is legally or illegally doing what he has to do to keep funds in his pocket. So his mother, being that's what she was probably accustomed to, or that's what she liked or whatever, she see it in her son and like, yeah, I like that, and he started to take on responsibility. So her mind, which is still young, starts to lose the vision between that's my son and that's my boyfriend,
Okay.
And I think to add to that, without going too psychological, when boys, they love their mothers, there's already a natural attraction when boys have mothers and vice versa for girls and their fathers. So if that, and mom is that first teacher, that first trainer, that first educator on so many levels. So when you have mom who taints that with sexual molestation and things like that, that's going to impact my trust level for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But I also think in terms of disclosure, it may make it more difficult for that male child, that boy, to disclose his abuse because of the loyalty, that traumatic bond that he has.
It's as if his mother becomes the victim.
Right.
And he has to take care of her.
He has to protect her.
Yep. And there goes that whole manipulation aspect again of power and control.
Yep. Indeed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So this is really interesting. So where can folks go to get help if they suspect that their child is being sexually abused by any adult, or if this is a child or youth that's listening to this program and they're in the same situation that James is in, where can they go?
Okay. So we at Pathfinders teach a curriculum called Darkness to Light, and it teaches people the red flags, what to look for if they see something odd. So, for instance, the well-publicized swim coach in West Allis, all the neighbors had noticed that there were a lot of teenage boys hanging out in front of his house or at his house, and that they were all drinking. Well, they did, so they noticed that something was weird, but they didn't take the next step, which would be to call somebody. Not all communities trust the police, so they may be the last people on your list of who you would reach out for help.
Right.
But you don't have to be a professional to call protective services.
Absolutely. In which the protective service is the Division of Milwaukee Child Protective Services.
That's right.
Then you have places like the Healing Center, the Sexual Assault Treatment Center. You can call 211. You can call Ask Your Teacher.
220-SAFE or 220-7233. But also to
save a life.
To save a life. And one thing that parents, just some very basic tips that we can take to prevent child sexual abuse. One thing is understand that public restrooms are a very high risk environment.
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
Again, they are, because whenever a child is molested in a public restroom, we hear about it. But again, the facts
sometimes.
Sometimes. Yeah. The facts state that the majority of children who are molested are molested by somebody they know.
In 90% of the cases, but they also mostly molested in their home environment.
In their home environment.
But a high-risk environment in public places, because, let's use, for example, a church environment. There's a lot of folks who come to church who have a lot of issues, mental health issues, whatever. There's a number of foster parents who take children to church with them, take their own children to church. And you have folks who have issues around restraints, sexual restraints, and will perpetrate on children. So, you need to really monitor your children when you take them or allow them to go to public restrooms.
Yes.
The relationships, even coaches. We talked about coaches, mentor relationships can
Facebook.
Facebook,
that's
yes.
a big one.
That's a huge.
And all the other social
media, everything.
Yes, so those are things that parents can do.
That's the quickest way now.
One of the critical things that we have to do even earlier now, because we're in a very hypersexualized, hyper-aggressive society, we have to have those real conversations with real words with our babies very, very early. All kids have different developmental stages, but we have to have those conversations.
Because I think it's important.
That's so key, because if we don't talk to kids and give them real facts, the perpetrator will.
Sure will. They'll fill in those blanks.
They will fill in the gaps. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we also know that in educating our children and talking to them, we really have to define what your body relationship should be like with certain individuals.
And that's part of the teaching
boundaries.
Part of that
teaching. Yeah, teaching those
boundaries. At Pathfinders, we have a whole program for children who have been sexually abused, and we have been working with boys as well as girls for many, many years.
All right. We're going to close. We got about 40 seconds left of this segment. Appreciate you all tuning in to Fresh Start Today. Thank you to my guests for being here today. We also, next week on the show, will have talking with Dr. Sosa from Life Striders, and we're going to be talking about postpartum depression in teenage mothers. That's going to be a very interesting conversation. So tune in to Fresh Start Today next Wednesday.
Have a good day, everybody.